Welcome to the BLTnT Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Loria, serving up real stories of business, life, technology, and transformations. You'll hear from interesting people about big changes from career shifts to life-altering decisions and the innovations that help make it all happen. It's about sharing those light bulb moments, pivot points, challenges overcome, and the journeys that inspire us to think differently. If you're on the lookout for insights to propel you forward, stories that resonate, or just a bit of inspiration on your next BLTnT move, you're in the right place. Let's dig in.
It was a hot summer night in New Haven, Connecticut. In front of 20,000 screaming, enthusiastic fans, I had just finished the concert. The band rushed off the stage into the dressing room because we had a long overnight drive. Me being the sweaty drummer, I was always the last one out of the dressing room. And on my way out, I noticed this guy in the doorway, wide-eyed. He had a camera and a pen. Now, I could have just walked by him, but I decided to stop and talk to him and see what I could do for him. And he asked me to sign something, which I did. I took a picture. And then he said, would you mind, Sandy, if you recommended me for some gigs in New York City? I said, Dave, I can't recommend you unless I hear you play. So here's my home number and my home address. I would like you to send me a cassette of your playing, and then I will send it to some contacts I have in the music business in New York City and see what happens. And he was very, very appreciative, to say the least. He couldn't believe that Sandy was giving him his home number and his home address. He shook my hand, gave me a big hug, and I walked out of that dressing room, down the hallway, onto the bus, never knowing if I would ever hear from him again. He could not believe that Sandy Gennaro gave him a chance. About 2.5 weeks later, I received David's tape. I sent this tape to a few music business contacts. Nothing happened. 2.5 years later, I get a call from David. And he says to me, Sandy, I'm managing this girl now, and she's going to be the biggest star on the planet. And I want you to be the drummer in her band. I said, David, with all due respect, everybody's new project is going to be the next big thing. He said, Sandy, you were so nice to me in the doorway. I do not want you to miss this opportunity. At least come down in the studio and meet this woman. So I went down in the studio and met this girl singer. I thought about it for a while, and I thought I'd give it a go, and I joined her band. The singer's name? Cyndi Lauper.
Over here is Kenny Harrison on keyboard. This here is John Kay on bass guitar. Over here is Sandy Gennaro on drums. And this here...
Little did I know that 5-minute encounter in the doorway with David Wolf would not only lead me to a world tour with Cyndi Lauper that lasted about 1.5 years, but also led to a world tour with Joan Jett and the Blackhearts 5 years later, because Joan was in the audience at one of Cyndi's shows. It also led me to meet someone by the name of Sherry. Sherry was in the audience in Charlotte Coliseum towards the end of that tour. Well, we met backstage. She became my wife in 1990. We're still together today, 35 years later. All because of that 5-minute encounter with David Wolf in that doorway. The seemingly little guy I paid attention to led to all that good fortune in my life. When David Wolf shows up in your life, do you stop, listen, and take a genuine interest in what he has to say without any expectation of anything in return? Or do you just blow by him? Possibly missing out on some life-changing opportunities. I know it's hard, We all have busy lives. We have kids, we have jobs, we have obligations. But when David Wolf shows up in the doorway of your life, how do you not know that it won't change someone's life, possibly yours, forever? When you think outside yourself and you focus on other people's wants and needs, giving them a chance, isn't it funny how you end up giving yourself a chance?
Welcome to another episode of the BLTnT Podcast. I'm Matt Loria and excited to bring you our newest guest, Sandy Gennaro, known as the rock and roll thought leader. Sandy was, or still is, a drummer, but professionally drummed for over 52 years and has parlayed his rock and roll career into now speaking, and he's authored a book. The book is called Beat the Odds in Business and Life. And I met Sandy a few months back, maybe about 6 months by this time, where he gave a talk to about 300 people and lit up the room. I mean, you energized those guys and gals like I've never seen before. So right afterwards, I walked up to you and I said, "Can I have some drumsticks?" No, I didn't say that because you already gave us drumsticks, but I said, "Man, I would like to get to know you and do a podcast episode." So thank you for letting that come to fruition, Sandy.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, Sandy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself so that other folks can get to know you a little bit more than just my 20-second intro there for you?
Well, basically, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but I started playing drums when I was like, I got this drum for Christmas at 2.5 years old, a toy drum. And I love the fact that I can beat on something with sticks and not get hollered at by my mother. But I didn't see a drummer play live until, not live, but on TV. I've seen pictures and recordings. I heard recordings. But when I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in 1964, February 9th, it changed my life. And that's when I decided to become a drummer. And I knew it was just a matter of time. And started playing drums at 14, played clubs and bars and after graduation parties and backyard parties and whatever for about 10, 12 years. And then I moved to LA to get my first big break in the music business. I ended up getting my first big break in New York, and that was in 1979. I did my first record for a legitimate label, Polygram Records. And then that was the first domino to fall, basically. And from there on out, I was on the road for close to 58 years at this point in time, and with many platinum artists, and played on top 10 records and whatever. But it all speaks to the fact that when you engage people, when you take an opportunity to engage people and lift them up and put a smile in their face, sometimes the result of that action is off the charts positive. In other words, I disagree with the saying karma. What goes around comes around in equal measure. Sometimes what goes around comes back 10-fold and 20-fold. So that's basically been the story of my life. I never really got a gig from a resume. It's always been helping people out, doing a favor for someone, not with anything in return, no agenda, just doing a favor for someone and helping them out. And that's parlayed into almost every gig I've ever had in my whole life. That's fantastic. Again, we'll get into the story, but how I became a speaker, and I have a new career right now as a speaker, and it's pretty successful, and I'm pretty busy, and that all comes from the fact that I wanted to put a smile on somebody's face. So
yeah, that's fantastic.
That's the way it goes.
I think I told you when we were chatting is that one of the things I've been working on for myself over the last couple of years is just reducing cynicism, reducing any sort of negative thought that comes to me when I'm first judging a situation or a person or whatever. And so I'm calling it D2E, default to empathy, versus default to cynicism or anything else like that.
So go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you have lived and breathed it in the stories that you've told, that you've told us, that I'm hoping that you'll share here. And it's really, you had a lot of opportunity to not be empathetic, and you chose otherwise. But I don't even know. I'd like you to tell a couple of those stories and tell me what you even think drove that behavior.
Basically, to speak to your point, where you judge a situation and you have, when we were born, Matt, we were born with a power of choice, and the thoughts that come into our mind when we see a situation and we judge a situation, a lot of thoughts come into our mind, but they're transient thoughts. And the ones that really root in our consciousness are the thoughts that we pay attention to, and we have a choice of what thoughts we pay attention to. Now, my empathy, it's never really been a conscious effort to default to empathy. That's basically been my MO from hearing conversations around my dinner table as I was growing up. My parents always advocated everybody's equal, no matter what color they are, no matter what sexual preference they are, no matter what kind of house they live in, what color of their skin, et cetera, et cetera. So I've always born with that. And it's been a natural way where if I see someone wanting an autograph and I'm really in a big hurry, like the Dave in the Doorway story that I tell in my presentation, this guy wanted an autograph, and it was a really hot summer night, and it was it was after a hot gig, and everybody was on the bus. We had a long overnight drive, and I was rushing around the dressing room on my own. And the key point here is the person whose name was on the marquee was already on the bus. This guy was in the doorway with a camera and a pen to get my autograph and a picture. And I was actually flattered. Now, I could have thought, what does this guy want? I'm in a hurry. I could have blew right by him, which a lot of rock star drummers would have done. But I didn't blow right by him because I was flattered that he wanted the drummer's autograph. I was walking around the mall with my mother at 15 years old. I first started playing drums. And she used to say, Sandy, why do you dress like those Led Zeppelin guys? I understand why you kind of dress like those Led Zeppelin guys, because you want to be a drummer. But why do you carry a pen? And I said, Ma, in case anybody asks for my autograph. I was 15 years old, already living as if, So anyway, I engaged the guy and I signed his autograph. And he even, I signed his autograph and his name was Dave. After I signed his autograph and took a picture, he even asked me to stay a little bit longer because he asked me to try to get him a gig in New York City. This gig was in Connecticut. And he goes, would you get me a gig in New York City? I'm a bass player here in Connecticut. And I said, man, I can't recommend you unless I hear you play. So here's my card. It's got my home address and my home phone number. Send me a cassette of your playing and I'll see what I can do. He couldn't believe you giving me your home address, your home. I said, no big deal, Dave. I got to go. So he gave me a really big hug. Couple of years, I got home from that tour. His tape was in the mail. I listened to it. It wasn't really that good, to tell you the truth. But I kept my promise and recommended him. 2 years later, in the fall of '83, he calls me back and he goes, hey, Sandy, I want you to, I found this singer in Queens, New York. She's going to be the biggest thing in 1984. I want you to be the drummer in a band. And originally, I rejected that idea. I said, I'm not joining a baby band, Dave, and riding a Winnebago again and share rooms in a hotel or whatever. He goes, Sandy, you might have.
Did you even remember who he was at that time?
Well, he explained what he was. He goes, yeah, I met you in the doorway, whatever. And you recommended me and whatever. And I kind of remembered, because I don't recommend people on the fly like that a lot. Sure. So, anyway, I reluctantly went down to the studio. He said, I signed her to a management deal, this singer in Queens. I signed her to a record deal. We're doing our first album, blah, blah, blah. Come down and at least meet this woman. I went down and it was Cyndi Lauper. And one thing led to the next. I played on time after time in that session. And she, when I first laid eyes on her, I said, she's not going to fly under the radar. This is a brand new artist, nobody ever seen, but she had that same image. She was really authentic in that image, the hairstyle, the voice, that's not a put on. A lot of artists when they become famous, they assume a certain image and they get more outrageous because now they're famous or whatever. With Cyndi Lauper, it was like that when she was a singer in Queens. She used to dress like that and whatever. So I said, she's not going to fly under the radar, number one. Number two, she played me some songs that they were working on the record that were very, very catchy, including Time After Time. And it's a really, really great song. There's not much to the drumming, but they're really great, catchy pop songs. And the look. So I ended up joining her band, and that was the beginning, the first major domino to fall. And then I went on the road with Cyndi Lauper. We appeared on the MTV New Year's Eve ball, and et cetera, et cetera. At one of the gigs was Joan Jett, and then that led to the Joan Jett gig 5 years later when she saw me play and whatever. So that was again, I'm not here to wave my own flag. The bottom line is that I defaulted, if you will, to signing an autograph for this guy in the doorway when I was really in a hurry. And you know what? I'm still reaping the benefits of that 5 minutes of Dave in the doorway, because in that Cyndi Lauper, the first Cyndi Lauper tour in 1984, I met the woman who ended up being my wife, and she's upstairs right now, 40 years after. So sometimes I think, well, what if I would have blew Dave off? Where would my personal career be? And where would my personal life be? Because my soulmate is sitting upstairs right now. So, and we're still together, happily married, and we have a beautiful 30-year-old girl. Her name is Jerry, and she's the tour manager for the Pretenders. So,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it works out. It worked out really well. So the lesson there is, and when you have an opportunity to put a smile on somebody's face, do it. You don't do it for an agenda. Like Dave in the doorway didn't have like a pretty sister behind him that I wanted to meet. I just wanted to put a smile on his face. And if I may expound on that, Matt, the way I look at it is that when we were born with a power of choice, as I mentioned. And I look at, we're also born with what people refer to as a soul. And that's what makes human beings different than any other living thing, is that we have a soul. We could emit emotion. We can feel emotion. We have the power of choice. But I look at it as a little flame burning inside each human being. And when I pay attention to Dave and sign his autograph, it's like me, figuratively speaking, having a little spray bottle of gasoline, and I spray David's little flame, and it engulfs the flame just for a second, yep. and it's just, and that's. And so if someone, let's say a Vista's chair, for example, or someone in authority gives someone else life-changing or business-changing advice, that's like them holding a fire hose of gasoline on that flame. So the amount of positivity that results from an interaction is different. But the thing is, you want to engulf that flame in any way, shape, or form. And the bottom line, without getting too philosophical at this hour in the morning, this is how we're going to be judged when we're pushing up daisies. Because you know what?
Sure.
All we make as a business, all we make, we have businesses and we go on tour to provide for our families or whatever. But the bottom line is, when we die, everything stays here, and what lives on is that little flame. It goes up. And it becomes one with all the other little flames that have passed before us. And basically, my opinion is, and I don't know for sure, obviously, but my opinion is that that's how we're going to be judged, is to what, in our lifetime on this planet, to what extent did you engulf the flame in other people? That goes on the ledger. You say, you sign an autograph for Dave, on the ledger. You say hi to somebody in a supermarket, you look at the name tag and go, thank you for your service, to the person that's checking your groceries. That goes on the ledger. You give someone life-changing advice, that goes on the ledger in a big way. You know what I mean? It's all a matter of degrees, but it goes on the ledger in the positive way. And conversely, if you spray water on the little flame, it goes on the negative side of the ledger.
Yeah.
And that's how we're going to be judged. So get yourself a little spray bottle from Walgreens, a little travel spray bottle, and put it on your desk, and let that be a reminder of, like, when you're walking around the planet in business or in everyday life, look for ways to engage people in a positive way. And you know what? You will benefit in the long run from that.
This episode of the BLTnT Podcast is sponsored by Auxiom, business IT and cybersecurity designed to outsmart chaos. Empowered by Juniper Networks. Automate your network with Juniper Networks and the Mist AI platform, the world's first AI-driven wired and wireless network. I love it. It's like that theory of, leave the place in a better condition than you found it, right?
Bingo. That's it.
And I think that's what's interesting in your career and where this also can flow into folks that are in business or really just anywhere in life, is that we don't always have a very long time to leave our mark on certain people, right? And so your interactions, like you mentioned some, like in the coffee shop, right? Or in the Dave in the doorway, right? These are things in time in passing, right? These are microseconds or micro interactions that, that we have this opportunity to deliver something positive to someone.
And you're put in a position like that. There's a power greater than ourselves at work. Whatever human manifestation of that higher power, that's up to you. It's not one way or trailways. There's a lot of different routes to the same destination. So whatever resonates with you as a physical representation of that higher power, but we have a little bit of whatever representation we have of that higher power. It's represented inside of us. We have a little bit of that inside of us right now. It's the higher power, greater than, we call it the universe, call it God, call it the Lord, call it Allah, call it Buddha, whatever you want to call it. It represents a higher power. And when we engulf the flame in other people, it engages the higher power in our life. And then we start getting thoughts and inspirations to do certain things that lead to positive results. It's hard to explain because there's a lot of intangibles going on.
Sure.
But when you think positively about future events, the glass is half full. Like when you say, when you said at the beginning, when you witness a negative a situation, you have a choice. You're going to think about it negatively or positively. Or when a problem happens in your life, are you going to think about, woe is me, pity party, but realize that problems are there to lift us up and to learn from or do something differently or pivot or whatever it is,
Sure.
So, it's when you think positive and you internally think positive and externally act positive to other people, the God energy smiles upon that and then enables you, clears the path, puts the rudder on your boat, if you will, with a nice strong engine and guides you in a certain way. And I'm proof positive. That's how my life developed. That's how my career developed. One thing after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. And there are numerous examples, Matt, numerous examples. And if we're here to 5 p.m., we can basically get the tip of the iceberg. But
well, you do a great job in just a couple of hours on your in your talk that you do in front of others, that to really encapsulate this and really guide folks along through your path, but then making very tangible tie-ins to what they can be doing in their lives and how they're impacting, especially employees, right? Team members, fellow team members, things like that. I've got kind of a story that's a little bit the opposite of what you're talking about with the, those interactions. And really it's it's kind of been the catalyst lately of, okay, it's time to talk about this default to empathy. Because I think it can help others. And I was at the doctor the other day. My wife was having a test done, and the way this doctor's office is set up, it's on the testing lab is on the lower floor, and on the upper floor there's the offices, and there's a few different physicians and physician groups in this building. So I'm sitting in the basement waiting room area, and I see a woman come in, and she walks up to the desk, and you can tell she's a little bit older. She's frantic, not totally losing it yet, but you can tell that she's confused a little bit. And she comes in and says, I'm sorry, is my husband here? And they kind of looked at her funny and said, well, who's your husband? She says his name. She says, well, no, he's not here, but he was supposed to be. He's late for his appointment right now. She says, well, I dropped him off 5 minutes ago at the front door, and I told him to wait there, but he's not there, so I assumed he walked down. And he didn't. He wasn't there.
Right.
So the nurse says to her, not, can I help you find your husband, or does he have a certain condition, or heck, this is a cardiologist office, so maybe he died of a heart attack in the stairway.
Right.
The woman says to him, well, if you don't find him in the next 5 minutes, you're going to have to reschedule his appointment. And I thought to myself, okay, I can't believe this is happening. So I happen to know one of the doctors who owns the practice. So I sent him a text and said, hey, I don't know if you're looking at your text, but there's an interaction going on down here that I don't think you'd be very happy with if you were watching it happen. Because I know how this guy is. This guy is empathy off the charts. Okay.
Right.
And so, I kind of sit there, let it play out a little bit. A friend of mine has a statement that says, let the play develop. So don't always jump right away. Let the play develop. So I let the play develop a little bit. And finally the woman had come back again, and she says, has my husband showed up? I can't find him. And the woman again says, no, he's not here, but we've got this appointment. You better find him. I'm thinking, okay, enough.
Right.
Enough. So I stand up and I said, okay, hey, what's going on here? I walk up to the person and said, she's like, well, I can't find my husband. I said, well, let's go find your husband. And the one nurse lady looks at me and says, and who are you? I said, who am I? I said, I'm somebody who's going to try to help this lady. I said, I know who you are. I said, you're the person who's threatening to get rid of her appointment. I said, right. You're not helping her. And so we went around and I said, okay, well, maybe he's in a restroom. So I went in all the restrooms, looked for him, went in all the suites, looked for him. We went up on all the different floors, and we couldn't find the guy. So she's like, well, he must have never come in the building. And I looked at her and I said, does he have dementia, ma'am? And she goes, yeah, he does. Boy. And I didn't realize how bad it was. And I said, okay. I said, well, let's continue doing what we can. So she says, I think I'm ready to call the police. And I said, okay, that's a good idea. Let's go down and tell the nurse that. So we go back down, and this nurse still couldn't understand why we wanted to call the police. And I'm thinking, my mind is blown. Now, thank goodness the doctor came down because he had got my text. So he obviously then read
right.
it. He came down with his assistant. They started to circle the jets, and this thing got real. And they found him. He was just in a different waiting room, and he had his back turned so nobody saw him. And so long story short, they found him. So thank goodness, he was okay, and everything. But, I was telling this story to somebody the other day, and they said, they used a Mr. Rogers sort of example too. They said, this is even worse than just a regular person not helping you. This is a nurse not helping you. And we're trained as kids to look for the people that we can trust, the police officer, the fire officer, the doctor, the nurse, right? That professional, the teacher, and I'm like, oh gosh, this is bad. But was that a bad interaction? Yes, it had a good outcome. But the best thing that comes out of this though is the learning, right? Hopefully somebody learns from this example, right? Whether it's the doctor's office, somebody in the doctor's office, or somebody who listens to this, or somebody who hears me tell the story, because I'm not going to go out and bash the doctor's office for this. This was one or two people making some mistakes. It's not the MO of the doctors who own it. It's not anything like that. But I'm hoping that this serves as a positive, and that we can leverage this default to empathy discussion in a variety of different places, right? And right here, what would you and I say? What's the first thing you would do if you were the coach coming in and talking to that doctor's office? How would you handle this?
Well, first of all, I'm curious to know the person that says, well, he's got an appointment now, and we got blah blah blah. Was that a receptionist behind the glass window, or
No,
was that some?
That was actually the nurse or the medical technician who was supposed to walk the person back to the room. So there was both types of people were there. There was the people behind the glass, and then there was this particular one was was dressed in the the scrubs, right?
Right. Well, you know what? I'm curious about the conversation that her superior had with that, that resulting conversation that happened after the event. Because if she reacted that way to that one sorrowful person that had Alzheimer's and the wife, then that's one instance that became evident. But what happens all the other days when somebody named Matt Loria is not in the office as backup?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's got to be straightened out. And then I question the vetting. It goes deeper than the vetting of that organization. Sure. How do they vet their people before they hire them? It's like so anyway, I would have done the same thing. I might have had a couple of choice words for that nurse too. How could you be so callous? This woman is,
it took some significant restraint.
I'm sure.
Then after the fact, my wife walks out and because she had kind of overheard what was happening, and she said, that same nurse also said, well, I'm going to check him in, but I don't, but I'll something to the negative, like basically like, I don't believe that he's here. And my wife was like, why on earth? Like you gotta pause, and you gotta take that second in these situations and pause and say, what benefit does this other person have in lying to me? Right. It doesn't make sense that the juice wouldn't be worth the squeeze. Why would I come in and lie to you about my husband being in this place? Right. And so I don't know what it is. I mean, but you see it in different places. You definitely see it in healthcare. You definitely see it in, we have the Secretary of State here in Michigan, but I think you guys have the DMV, right? You have a Department of Motor Vehicles.
In Nashville, I think they call it that. Right.
Okay. You see these roles where people are in these roles where, they are dealing with the public, right? And the public can be a little crazy, let's admit that. But that it's still another human being on the other end of this. Right. And what benefit do they have in making something up? All the power lies in you to pause, let that negative thought sit before you turn it into negative action. Right. Well, two questions to that woman would have stopped the negative interaction and would have led right to help versus negativity.
I can't find him. I dropped him off 5 minutes ago, and I can't find him. He's not here. Blah 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 blah. The first question I would ask is does he have any kind of attention deficit? Like, does he have Alzheimer's?
Yeah.
Is there an
issue?
I'm puzzled by, listen. Human beings develop at a certain different rates. You know what I mean? Their consciousness develops at certain rates. But when you witness things and when you watch the news and especially what's going on in LA now, they're catching, they witness people starting a fire that in 100-mile-an-hour winds. Are you kidding? But if people would only, and I don't care where you are on the consciousness totem pole, it's very simple. And what you said, let the play develop. In other words, stop for a second before you're acting in a certain way. Think about what are the ramifications of your action going to be in the next minute, the next hour, or the next year. And if people thought about that, they wouldn't do 99% of the negative stuff they do, because it always produces what kind of thrill do you get about starting a fire that's going to endanger hundreds and hundreds of people? There was a story. I read the New York Post every day. I read the New York paper online. I live in Nashville. But a couple of weeks ago, there was a homeless person was sleeping on the subway. And this other person set them on fire.
Yeah.
Not only that, and sat back and watched it and fanned the flames. Think what positive is going to come with that. Not only is that, you're spraying, figuratively speaking, what I said before, he's spraying water on that flame, right. He's, what kind of karma does he have to have? You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. And then I get, it's like a snowball rolling down a hill, me mentally thinking about stuff like that. When people think about war and destruction as being a way to come to to come to an agreement about a problem, to resolve an issue. Oh, let's go ahead and destroy their country. Let's go ahead and drop a bomb on a hospital because we want to. Come on now. There's other people. That's somebody's mother, father, daughter, son, uncle. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it just boggles my mind.
I think that, what's coming up for me when you say that is it's the same type of thing when someone's trying to, convert you religiously. Right?
Correct.
Sandy, you're going to burn and die. Okay, well, that's not a great way to convert me.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct.
Live a life in a certain way, and hopefully Sandy says, hey, things, you seem pretty happy. What causes that? Well, I'm glad you asked, and then you can go into a conversation. But and in my world, we're in the cybersecurity world. So we're talking a lot about, how do we articulate a message that everyone needs these certain things in cybersecurity, and only 40% of the people have them, without screaming fear and doubt, all day long. Because the Chicken Little story, right, or the boy who cried wolf, those don't work, right? If you scream it too loud for too long, it becomes just background noise,
right?
And so nobody's hearing it. So I think that you got to do it your way, right? The way that you do it, which is live authentically your way in a good, positive way, and let the law of attraction make things happen versus trying to force things. So
right, life is a. I was going to say
positive flow.
Getting in the positive flow, go with the flow. Yeah. You go with the flow. You're in that river, and the river is flowing nice. And if you think positively and you treat people right, and you think about the ramifications of your actions, and you try to make it all positive and engulf the flame, you're in that flow of energy. And, sometimes my visualization, my goals have been manifested in real life, but sometimes because of an act of kindness, that's how I became a speaker, Matt, and you heard the story in the presentation.
Yeah, you got to tell this. You have to tell the story. Because this is so one of the things we like to talk about on the show is transformations. And I would say this is a mega transformation, how you went from rock and roll star to speaker, and by the way, highly relevant speaker. Right?
Thank you.
In this area that you teach people about in the talk that you give. So tell that story.
Well, I was like 66 years. I'm 73 now. So I was like 66 years old, 6 to 7 years ago. I was still touring with a band, playing arenas or whatever. But the thought crossed my mind, how long are you going to do this? How long are you going to be on a bus with a rock and roll band when you want to retire and kick back a little bit like that? I'm playing an arena. I had no thoughts of what I'm going to be doing after touring. And because of my wanting to put a smile on when I'm doing an encore, now I'm in San Diego in an arena, and I see a woman in a wheelchair, And she's kind of making googly eyes at me, and I'm making googly eyes at her or whatever. You can tell she was kind of afflicted or whatever. And I said, she's going to get my drumstick. To myself, she's going to get my drumstick. So we finished the show. I tossed her a drumstick from the lip of the stage. I turned to walk towards the left side to go off stage, and I looked back, and the guy next to her intercepted the drumstick. There was a fork in the road. I could have just went, oh, okay, well, okay, and on my merry way. But I went back and I made sure she got the drumstick. I replaced the guy's drumstick, so he was happy. The next day, I get a call from the husband of the woman in the wheelchair. And he Facebook messaged me and says, can I have your cell phone number? You threw a drumstick to my wife last night in San Diego. And I thought, well, maybe I should call my lawyer because my drumsticks are all...
Maybe she poked her eye.
I poked her eye, or maybe she got a splinter because the drumsticks are kind of splintered at that point in time. But there was another fork in the road, and I said, you know what? I gave him my phone number. He called me, and he was over the moon, thankful. Oh, she's going to put the stick in a shadow box or whatever. In that conversation, he says to me, I'm coming to Nashville to speak. I live in Nashville. He's in San Diego. I'm coming to Nashville to speak. Can I meet you for a cup of coffee? I want to thank you in person for engaging my wife in the wheelchair. There was yet another fork in the road. I could have went, what was this guy? I want to go downtown Nashville at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning to meet a complete stranger. He already thanked me. But I met with him. I went down, engaged him. He told me, he asked me about how I got certain gigs. I told him the Dave in the Doorway story, how I got Cyndi Lauper's gig and what that led to, whatever. He invites me to his presentation. I went to his presentation. He introduced me on the side of the stage. He asked me if he can convey the Dave in the Doorway story to his corporate audience, and it resonated with the corporate audience. At the end, walking out of that gig, he said, "Man, you have a speaking career ahead of you. People need to hear this story because it's really, really important." Long story short, the husband of the woman in the wheelchair was a Vistage speaker. And his name was Michael Pierce. He goes by the name in Vistage, or his presentation name is Antarctic Mike. And he's a very popular, well-known, he does Vistage gigs as well as conferences and all. He's been doing this for 10 years or whatever. And so every time he subsequently came to Nashville to speak for Vistage, he used to invite me. And at the time, I'm getting my PowerPoint together. I'm trying little Chambers of Commerce gigs, 15, 20 minutes, just to get my feet wet with the whole presentation thing. I'm used to speaking in front of groups of people because I taught for 27 years at a school in Manhattan, music business and whatever. So I was used to speaking to musicians about the business of music. But so I met some Vistage chairs as a result of him Michael invited me to his Vistage gigs in Nashville. And one thing led to the next, where I became close friends with some of these Vistage chairs in Nashville. And they said, when are you going to speak for Vistage? And I thought, what? I'm a rock and roll drummer. What am I going to tell a room full of CEOs? And oh man, people got to blah, 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 blah. They gave me the information to be vetted, to become a Vistage and be evaluated. It was a bunch of online stuff, and I had to do some pro bono gigs for Vistage, whatever. So I ended up being onboarded as a Vistage speaker. And then about a year of speaking to these Vistage meetings, I was asked to do Chair World. And if anybody in Vistage is listening to this, is watching this podcast right now, it's Chair World is a once a year conference that Vistage has, and they invite 800 to 900 Vistage chairs from around the world.
Let's just give a quick definition of what even Vistage is. Vistage, and there's other organizations like it, but it's a CEO peer group, and people get together on a regular basis, and then bigger groups get together a couple of times a year. And then the Chair World is really the biggest event of all, where all of the essential group leaders go to kind of congregate, and they get to see usually what's considered the best. So you might not brag a little bit. I'm going to brag for you. Only the best get to go present there. So obviously you touched enough people that said, hey, we think we need this guy here.
And the Vistage chairs, and there's 800 or 900 of them in one room from all over the planet. Okay. And it's not just America, all over the planet. they asked me to do an hour-long keynote with a drum set. And based on that, I got a standing ovation from after that Vistage Chair World in 2023, I'm not sure, 2022. And as a result of that, my speaking career just blew up because the chairs are the ones that hire speakers for their individual meetings. And they have meetings once a month. Thousands of chairs have thousands of meetings once a month, and they hire a speaker. So I was in front of 800 to 900 of these Vistage chairs. So I went, as a result, I went to Malaysia to speak for a joint Vistage summit in Malaysia, Singapore, in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I'm in talks to go to UK in October of 25. So, but again,
are you approaching about 300 talks?
Well, just Vistage talks, I'm about 270 now.
Okay. And you also do this for corporations and other groups as well, can hire you as well.
Private companies. I'm doing one in Seattle on this. I leave tomorrow for Salt Lake City, not Seattle, Salt Lake City. I do one on Friday morning to a tire and rubber company in Salt Lake City. Great. So those, and then there's conferences. There's 3-day conferences of like the Welders Conference where welding companies from all over the country come. The 3-day conferences with breakouts in a big, so it's, but again, I hesitate waving my own flag here, Matt, but the reason why I tell the story is that it's because of that defaulting to empathy. I want to put a smile on that woman's face. She's handicapped. I want to put a smile on her face, and I threw her a drumstick. And look I have a new career. My wife is retired now. We're partners in my speaking business. She handles a lot of the numbers and a lot of the book orders and whatever. She handles takes a lot of stuff off my plate, and life couldn't be better. But it's as a result of me wanting to fan the flame of that woman in the wheelchair. When you take the blinders off, it's called altruism. Empathy is looking at life through somebody else's lens, and how would you want to be treated if you had their lens on, if you were walking in their shoes? Walk a mile in their shoes before you make a judgment. But altruism.
My mother-in-law has a sign above her toilet. She's 93, so it says, "You are my friend when you walk in my moccasins." Right.
Right.
And that's the statement. And I don't know if you know about the name Auxiom. So my former business partner named this company, our company, and it's AU is gold and Axiom is rule. So it's our way of saying the golden rule.
That's awesome.
Treating others how they want to be treated, but without being, we don't want to be preachy about it or anything
right.
like that. But it's like, that's how we know if somebody's a good fit here is if do they have the empathy gene?
Right. Right.
Can they put the other person first? Can they think like that?
Correct. And the other word too that I align with is altruism.
Yep.
Which means thinking outside yourself. In your actions and your words, you don't shine the spotlight on yourself. You see how you can shine the spotlight on other people. And that's why to go offline for a second. That's the major role of a drummer, is to shine the spotlight on the band that he supports, even though he's the most important person in the band. Take a lesson. The drummer is the most important person in the band. The band goes as the drummer goes, but it's the drummer's job to support. You support the people on the stage. You support the singer. You support the songs. And that's the key to a successful drummer. Think about this. The girls just want to have fun or time after time. Just listen to the drum track of time after time. It's the same drum track through the whole song. There's no fills. There's no crashes. There's no nothing. But it's and that's why I got the Joan Jett gig, because she came to see Cyndi Lauper on one of her gigs, and she loved my enthusiasm, and she loved the fact that I served those very simple songs without shining the spotlight on my drummer self with fills and fancy stuff, So,
you explained that in the talk that I was in, and I know you modified the talk a little bit, depending on your audience a little bit, but it was all about how leaders should be taking the same role, right? Think of yourself more as the drummer
Right.
than the lead singer, right? So the business needs to have somebody keeping time, right?
Right.
Directing, right?
Right.
And so I thought that was interesting. What I really find great about it, I mean, Sandy, I sit through a lot of different talks, whether it's in Vistage or, in other groups and things that I get invited to. So I'm very blessed that I get to do that, but it's very rare that I remember so many things. And that was why it was so important to me to want to do something with you was, man, the stories resonate. You can't forget them. They're easy. Right. Mm-hmm. And on top of that was the fact, like one of the guys I brought a guest that day who is now a member of our group. He's a friend of mine, and this guy's a West Point grad, aviator in the military, president of a company, about as stoic as they come. And I looked over at this guy during your talk, and he's banging drums, doing
awesome.
his thing, and
That's awesome.
Man, this guy knows how to get to people at their core, and
that's awesome.
People are still talking about you, which is just fantastic. So I think rightfully so that you were at Share World, like rightfully so that you're at these bigger events and you're touching people, but your message is so simple, and I just so we'll the KISS model, keep it simple, stupid, right? Like,
right.
You have these great stories. So we have Dave in the Doorway, right? Was a guy that you touched, and then he came back and you got to see that one play out full circle. Mm. Remind me of a couple of the other stories that you like to share with people that are memorable. There was one, I remember you in the Johnny Carson show. Right. And I also remember something with you in front of the kind of the biggest group that you had ever played for. There was a few lessons that were learned from those couple of things. Can you talk about those? Or I'm missing the mark?
I've been hearing a lot lately about the knock. When an employee knocks on your office door and says, "Got a minute?" and you immediately know it's some sort of IT incident. But Auxiom IT can help. Whether you're having a problem, need consulting, an upgrade, or a managed IT approach, they focus on preventing cyber attacks and proactive solutions that deliver results. My friend Matt Loria and everyone at Auxiom are ready to help before or after you get the knock. Visit Auxiom.com and let Auxiom IT help you outsmart chaos.
Talk about whatever other stories you think are the most.
There was one, and it's a lesson for corporate that I relay in my talk, and I think you heard this when I as a result of that first band that I was in, a band called Blackjack, 1979, was my first proper recording for a pro label, Polygram Records. Polydor was the subsidiary. We did a tour in Europe, and one of those gigs was there was a manager we did the city was Frankfurt, Germany, and there was a manager in the audience, and he called me back a couple of years later, and he said, "I saw you with this band Blackjack. I just signed this band called Kraft, Craft, Frankfurt based, and we signed them to a label. We want you to play on the record." So I went to Frankfurt, played on the record. Then a couple of months later, he called me. This is 1985 now, actually the early winter of 1986. He called me back, and this is before the internet, so there was transcontinental phone calls at $6 a minute or whatever. And he said, "We want you to do the tour in support of the record." So I asked him a couple of questions before I gave him a yes and no. "How long is the tour for?" He said, May until September 1986. I go, "What's the mode of transportation?" He said, "Well, we have really no budget. We got to ride in a van." "Okay, what's the compensation?" The compensation, I'm not even going to mention. It was really embarrassing. And I said, "Man, I'm sorry, but I'm thinking to myself, I didn't say this to the manager." The manager's name was Uwe Block. I didn't say this to the manager, but I said, "Listen, he wants me to ride around in a van for hardly any money with 3 German guys all summer long. I don't think I'm going to go for that." So finally, three or four transcontinental phone calls later, he says to me, "Listen, the band really wants you to do this. We're going to make you a limited partner in the band. So there's a meager salary, but if the album becomes successful and we recoup the advance, you're going to get part of the royalty. I said, man, these guys really, really want me. So the last question I said, well, who are we opening for? He said, Queen. So now I'm like, I said, oh shit, I would have did this tour for free. I love Queen. So anyway, we went on tour with Queen, and now we're opening for Queen, and they're and this was last Freddie Mercury. In retrospect, it was Freddie Mercury's last tour before he got too sick. And so it was just awesome. We were invited to all their parties, and Queen as a band is just awesome. And if you get a chance to see them coming around with Adam Lambert as a singer, go, because it's just awesome just hearing these guys, whatever. But as people and as a band, to the opening act, they let us have the full PA. They let us have the full complement of lights, which is a lot of different. A lot of times a headliner limits the opening act's facility, whatever.
Sure.
We were also invited to all of their parties, we were all invited to. So I had a lot of social time to spend with these guys. And I asked Freddie, I said, if you've seen Queen live or you've seen Bohemian Rhapsody, you see there's a portion of every show where Freddie goes and does a call and answer with the audience. He goes, hey, yo, and he gets the audience to respond. And then after about 20 seconds, he does this operatic thing and everybody starts smiling or whatever. And I said to him, Freddie, why do you do that? He goes, well, Sandy, Queen's performance is not a spectator sport. We want to see get the people involved in our success. We want them to talk about the fact that they sang along with Freddie Mercury, whatever. And then I said to Roger Taylor, the drummer, who's the nicest guy on the planet, I said, Roger, I know for a fact playing Girls Just Want to Have Fun for night after night after night after night the same way. No fills, no crashes, nothing. It's kind of a challenge to kind of stay involved and maintain your enthusiasm, which I always did. And one of the reasons why Joan Jett hired me, because of my enthusiasm all throughout those simple songs or whatever. And because I was on the side of the stage every night, and Roger Taylor is going boom, boom, bah, full of enthusiasm, and he's playing that beat for like 20 seconds before even the singing comes in. And I said to him, I said, man, you're full of enthusiasm, Roger. Aren't you bored playing that? I know I get bored playing Girls Just Want to Have Fun every night, but same way. And he said, Sandy, I'm bored as shit playing that song. But I never want to let my people see me looking bored. I want to share the enthusiasm with my audience. And then he says to me, and then I asked him, I said, well, how'd you come up with that beat? What was that beat about? And he said, Sandy, we wanted to create, and Freddie's nodding his head, and Brian is nodding his head as Roger is talking. We wanted to create a beat that resonates with everybody. Not just drummers, not just musicians, but the 12-year-old girl in Tokyo that hears boom, boom, brah. They know it's We Will Rock You, and the next thought it's Queen. So the lesson there, I filtered all of that information down, and the lesson that I share with corporate America is that make your message very, very simple. Don't have your people scroll through a mile-long email to see, an email thread. Well, what does this guy want what does my leader want this week? So make your message very, very simple. Second of all, repeat it often, because people tend to forget 80% of what they're told a couple of days after they're told it. So you may be sick of hearing yourself say something to your kids or to your group or your team at work, but they have their own mental thing going on. So sometimes it takes a lot of the same input to root in somebody's mind. And always never let your people see you looking bored. Always share your enthusiasm, because enthusiasm is contagious, and enthusiasm, when you're enthusiastic about it, it's a positive emotion, and positivity, it's positive. So the 3 lessons in a nutshell: make your message very simple, repeat it often, and never let your people see you looking bored. Those are the three lessons that I get from Queen. And I have little memorabilia things all in my studio regarding that tour. And my studio, I'm looking around, is full of memorabilia, and everything. I have a sign, a little plastic laminated sign of Queen's hospitality. I stole the sign off the door with the hospital. So it triggers a lot of emotions. And a lot of positive memories about the stuff that transpired in my career. And bottom line is that, I was not a child prodigy drummer, Matt. I started playing at 14. Nobody in my family, even though my dad, before he passed away, I was told by my mother that he was a big fan of drummers like Buddy Rich, big band drummers or whatever. But nobody in my family plays a musical instrument. And I wasn't a child prodigy. And you know what? I can do a solo. I have a work ethic. I've taught drums for 27 years. So I have the tools to and put the chameleon hat on to fit my drumming style to the Monkees, or Cyndi is different than the Monkees. Bo Diddley is different. Pat Travers is different. But I could wear that hat drumming wise and fit into their genre. But I can do a solo. And I get people involved in my solo. I learned that from Queen. I have people clapping along with my solo, as I did at the gig, at the presentation that you saw. So, I owe my success to the guidance of the God energy and the things that he puts in my path, and I take advantage of. And I had no idea about signing the autograph for Dave in the Doorway. That's going to lead to meeting my wife. What guides you? What thought process allows you to help people out that lead to other things? I was at a presentation the other day, and there was somebody in a Q&A suggested to me when I mentioned that Dave in the Doorway story, and I said, what guides me? What guides me to sign an autograph for the guy where I could have easily passed by, just blew by him? The guy raised his hand, and I said, the question to the audience was, has any seemingly insignificant encounter lead to unexpected positive results, like my Dave in the Doorway story? He raised his hand and he said, you know what, Sandy? I was going to my high school prom and I didn't have a date. He got dressed in a suit and went to his high school prom by himself. He's standing there by himself, like a penny waiting for change. And he sees a woman across the gym floor, wherever the prom was held. And he sees a woman standing by herself. And maybe the boyfriend or the date went to the men's room or something. He waited there. And 25 minutes later, she was still standing by herself. He goes and asks her to dance. They dance together. They dance together again. They danced together several times that night. And then he asked her, hey, do you want to spend some time afterwards? We can go for a bite to eat or whatever. They went for a bite to eat. They started dating. And now, all these years later, this guy was like maybe a 60-year-old CEO. He said, she's my wife now. And I'm going, what inspired you to go to a prom, a couples only event by yourself, get dressed and go by yourself? Weren't you embarrassed? He goes, I just felt it was the right thing to do. Not only that, but it inspired his wife to go, his future wife to go. So it's like, what guides you is there's a intangible, and I call it the God energy that's inside. And when you think positive and you're open to such ideas, just go and take advantage of it, and you never know what will happen. And
well, I remember you talking about you talk about also you got to have your peepers up though for that too, right? And so like you said that you're always looking for the God winks, right?
Right.
So whether you're driving through the parking lot and the first spot opens up and you pull right in, kind of magically. Right. And you go, hey, thanks,
Right.
And so you acknowledge that with some gratitude each time too.
Absolutely. And gratitude and appreciation, Matt. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's a very, very important part of the whole big picture, is whatever you have in a positive, be thankful for it. You know, if, like you said, if somebody pulls out of a parking space and you're looking for a parking space, late for your reservation, and there's your parking space, well, thank you very much. When I do a presentation in Detroit or in Springfield, where was it, in Michigan? When I do that presentation,
we were in Southfield,
I leave that presentation going, well, thank you very much. When I meet people like you and people come up to me and say, man, thank you, I really needed to hear that thank you so much, because to me, I'm the channel. It doesn't emanate from me. Yeah, I do my work ethic, my PowerPoint and the content or whatever, but I see myself as the channel of positivity, where, you know, and sometimes I pray, being transparent right now, I'm being transparent. Sometimes I put my game face on prior to a presentation and just pray. I just want to be the channel for your good positivity. I want to speak through me. I want to be your instrument, and I'm speaking to the higher power, which I'm speaking to myself, really, because as I said, and I'll belabor this point till the day I die, we all have a little bit of that higher power. The higher power ain't somewhere else, and we pray and petition, and we expect a booming voice to come out of the heavens going, oh, no, it's those little signs that you get. Sign the autograph. Do this piece of crap gig for this oldies band, the Tokens, because it's good. And the musical director, I do him a favor by doing this Tokens gig. Coming off the Queen tour, this is another story. I was asked by this guy, called me. I was living on Staten Island. It was after a Queen tour. Now, I'm on one of the biggest tours in the world. I just come off of it. And he's asking me to do this piece of crap Tokens gig. They had a hit in the 50s called Lion Sleeps Tonight. And he was the musical director, bass player, and his drummer's mother passed away. 2 days, he had a gig 2 days hence. Called every guy in Manhattan. Nobody was going to do the gig, too short notice, whatever. The money was crap. You have to bring your own drums. It was about 2 hours away from my house in Staten Island. It was like a 12-hour turnaround. I didn't really want to do the gig. Sandy, you're the last person I'm going to call. If I got to cancel the gig, if you can't do it, I might lose my gig. And he was almost close to tears. And a complete stranger, by the way. And his name was Jerry Renino. Rest in peace, Jerry. I did the gig. Couple of months later, he says, hey, thank you for bailing me out. The gig went really well. It was a pain in the ass to do it, but it went really, really well. And a couple of months later, he calls me. He says, man, thank you for bailing me out, but I'm the musical director of this TV band that's doing a reunion tour in the summer of 1987. Do you want to do it? We're playing amphitheaters. We have a crew. It's a full-blown. The compensation was not bad at all. And the gig was the Monkees. When the Monkees reunited to go on tour, when they were replaying the episodes on MTV, it reunited the interest and whatever. So I did the Monkey tour. And that one tour was thanks enough for that Jerry Renino story. But you know what? I did almost every reunion tour. Sure. This is the comment that I made, where you bring a shovel full and you get a dump truck in return. Where I did every Monkey tour. I had to rehearse for that first Monkey tour. I lived in an apartment in Manhattan. I had to rehearse for that first Monkey tour in a studio at a music school that rented their rooms out after hours, called the Collective Music School in New York City. And I coming out and paying for my time. The guy goes, what were you doing? The director of the school was taking my money. What were you doing in that room? And I said, I'm going on the road with the Monkees. He goes, oh, man, that's great, man. You sound really good. Did you ever think about teaching? And I said, no, I never thought. He goes, man. And I thought about my mother said. I said, she used to say, if you ever want to learn how to swim, jump in the deep end of a pool. So I hardly knew how to read music. And now I'm saying to myself, this guy wants me to be a faculty member, we need a rock guy here. So I ended up, and that started a 27-year teaching career. Okay, so now I had my day gig. To keep the lights on, or to help keep the lights on in my house, you know, in between tours and records and whatever. I was teaching the instrument, which I became much better. If you ever want to do something very well, teach somebody how to do it. And I was doing that 20 hours a week at the maximum student load that I had. it doesn't end there, Matt, because in my involvement with that drums,
say like because the drum school, then didn't that lead to the videos? Then is that what?
Well, that's what I was going to say.
From there,
well, what I was going to say was being involved with the Drummers Collective. I created a Drum Basics VHS instructional drum video. There was a lot of drum videos on the market that showed a drummer doing a hot shot, technical, very highly technical solo. And I said to myself, man, it might turn some kids off seeing like somebody doing an unbelievable solo. So I created a video to teach drummers the very basics of drums. And it's called Drum Basics. Warner Brothers, picked up on it. And then, Yamaha Drum Company picked up on it, and they put the DVD of that Drum Basics in the box of every new Yamaha drum set sold around the world. So it like that little effort of helping Jerry Renino out on that Tokens gig. And not only that, but I got my first royalty check exactly when I needed it. So it was like, it's unbelievable, how things happen, how unforeseen, beyond our limited human imagination, unforeseen positive things can happen from a small little positive engagement with somebody.
Yeah. I wrote myself a note here, and what I think is interesting is if you hear a lot of people that are giving advice nowadays, they're saying, protect your time, say no more than you say yes, and it talks a lot about that. And I'm not saying that your message is say yes to everything, but you said yes to some really simple things and things that appeared uncomfortable too. But, there was something in your gut, something in your spirit, that told you do it. Right. And,
right.
And it's like it just continues to pay off in spades for you. So I think that along with the, keep the message simple, repeat it often, never let them see a board, and say yes. Right? I mean, say yes is the kind of part of who you are.
That's the template. And yes, sometimes I say no if I'm physically not able to do what they ask, or if I'm busy or my schedule doesn't permit me to do what they ask. Of course I'm going to say no. But if I have the ability, I don't, and I had the wherewithal and the scheduling or whatever it has to do with, and I don't say no for the sake of saying no because I want to sit home and you know what I mean? So when I have the ability to I'm flattered that I am in a position to make somebody's life better, or to do a favor for somebody, no matter how insignificant it is. I do it. And you know what? I didn't get this from a book. I got it from around the dinner table when I was growing up with my parents. My parents, you asked at the beginning, how did you develop that default empathy mindset? Well, it's always been there from the very, very beginning. Very beginning of my life.
I think for people who haven't had that exact upbringing, I think that, you are that little bit of gasoline on their flame that can help ignite that. So I think you're doing great work. So
I appreciate it. I'm
really
man. And
you said yes to being here.
Well, I am too, because it's really, really good to get to know you better. And I remember that conversation we had in Detroit or in Springfield. But I offered that if things went south for you there, I could manage a 2/4 beat on the drums. That's about all I can do. Well, I can teach you how to play the drums. It's very, very simple. A lot of people think it's apples and oranges with different limbs and playing different rhythms with the different limbs, but it's not. It's playing different parts of the same rhythm. And if we had the time and the wherewithal, I can bring you over to my studio right here in Nashville. We have 2 drum sets set up all the time, and I'll teach you. Anytime you're in Nashville, Matt, you have an open invitation to call me in advance and come here, and we can bang away on the drum and put some headphones on, and we'll rock out.
Fantastic. And you've got always a place to stay in the Detroit area. If you come back here, we'd love to have you stay with us. So
awesome.
Thanks for everything. And Sandy does a really great job at the end of his presentation basically a compilation of all a number of the famous songs that you've played on. We want to play that for everybody.
Awesome.
As the outgoing video of this. So we're going to clip that in here. And
awesome.
And thank you, Sandy.
You're very welcome, Matt.
Appreciate you being a part of this.
I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you so much. And I want to give a shout out to Jackie, who we were in communication to get this together. And thank you, Jackie, for all your input. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate the time.